Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, and the start of season slog continues. I mean, we've said this a few times, but I hate this phase of the season. What a terrible phase. I mean, just got back into racing, and then we keep on having these really long gaps between races, and we're just a bit stuck, really. So we're now between Thermal and Long Beach, so there is a 3-week gap. So before Thermal, we reacted to your crazy IndyCar predictions, which I thought was quite a fun episode. We had some outrageous takes in there, and it was just a nice bit of fun, a nice little sort of time killer between we go back into racing. And we thought for this week we'll keep a similar theme. We're just going to be reacting to your crazy IndyCar rule changes. We've got a few of our own just because there's been in particular one or two which have sort of brought up this topic a little bit more in recent weeks. So we've got our own couple, and then we'll go and react to some of your rule changes, which should be quite a bit of fun because I really did enjoy reacting to your predictions. So we'll do it again as always. Occasionally, we'll put this on the r-IndyCar Reddit. So if you do want to get involved in the podcast, comment on that Reddit post if you are in that subreddit and get involved with the podcast. You may notice I'm slightly ill this week, so prior apologies, listeners. But we will power on through this week, and hopefully I'll be a bit better next week. But as we've been going 103 episodes or something now, approaching 2 years, and this isn't the week that I'm going to stop our continuous streak of almost 2 years worth of episodes. So we're going to march forward. And the rule change which really brought up this episode and just has been in a lot of discussion recently is the blue flag rule for IndyCar. So obviously the majority of motorsport series, the rule is if you are a lap down or you're about to head a lap down to the leader, you'll be shown the blue flag and you'll get out of the way. The blue flag rule is very different in IndyCar. Obviously, once you're going a lap down, you are allowed to fight for your position. And you will only be shown what's called the command blue flag once you're a lap down to the entire field. So be quite late on, realistically. Now, even so, it's a bit weird because obviously you'll have some Honda drivers who try and hold up the Chevrolet drivers, and the Chevrolet drivers try and hold up the Honda drivers, unless you're Pato Ward, who believes that isn't the case. Some drivers will basically, if they're going a lap down, will just let everybody pass anyway. They don't want to be involved in that. They've had a bad day, they'll just let everybody go. So it's not very concrete. Every driver seems to sort of do their own thing when it comes to the blue flag rules. And I think Alex Palou was the one who really instigated this the other week after St. Petersburg, because he was stuck behind Stingray Rob for a large portion of laps. Rob used, I think, 70, 80 seconds of his push to pass in order to keep Palou behind and stay on the lead lap. And from someone like Rob's perspective, obviously, if there's a caution, he will cycle to the back of the field and that distance will be negated. But if he does let Palou pass, that sort of opportunity is gone. So that's why drivers will fight so hard to stay on the lead lap, because you get an opportunity if a caution comes out. So it's one that's come up quite a lot, and one that has provided a lot of discussion. Palou's sort of theory was maybe the defending car can't use overtake, but at the same time, like, you should really be able to use overtake whenever you want, apart from starts and restarts, unless you're Team Penske. So, yeah. What's your thoughts on the blue flag rule? Very complicated one in IndyCar. It's not very simple, is it?
I mean, before I weigh in, should we just play in what Palou said the other week?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Here's what Alex Palou had to say to us after St. Pete. Thanks, Dave. First of all, Alex, you obviously got stuck behind Stingray for a little while. So just while you're in the cockpit and you are trying to pass a car at the end of the lead lap, what is kind of going through your head, and how do you manage, I guess, the frustration of trying to get past?
Similar to when you're in a highway and there's somebody that is driving at like 40 miles an hour on the left and wouldn't move, and then you pass him and he's like trying to go faster than before and he passes you again, and it's that kind of frustration, especially when he is able to use the OT and you as the leader, you don't want to burn 50 seconds of OT to pass a lap car, but he can do that to try and stay in front of you, especially if he's from another engine manufacturer. So it's a shame, but honestly, I know that's the rules, and there's been some races where that was beneficial to me, like to be second and to have the first one trapped in traffic. This time I was the one that started losing my gap to Newgarden. I think it went from 5 seconds down to like 0.9. So we lost a bunch of track time, but at least we didn't lose any track position.
And kind of just to follow up on that, obviously you say that is the rule. Do you believe, and I know this has been a talking point for a while, that there should be a blue flag rule like you get in F1, for instance?
No, I don't. I wouldn't like the blue flag. I mean, yes, today I would have said, yeah, blue flag, please get this car out of the way. But there's many times where I'm last as well, and I don't want to get lapped. So I like the blue flag rule. Maybe I would modify the OT rule, because that would be, I would say more fair, because that way you don't allow the car in front of you to burn, as I said, 50 seconds of OT. Like, I think Stingray went from 70 seconds of OT down to 0 in like 10 laps. So, yeah, as the leader, you cannot burn all that OT, because you might need it in case there's restarts or New Garden attacking you. So, yeah, I would modify some stuff, but I like the fact that you don't have to give up your position.
So, yeah, just weighing in on what Pelot says, I quite like his idea, to be honest. I think it is a point of uniqueness in IndyCar that there is not a blue flag rule. I think it is good that, drivers are able to fight for every position, because at the end of the day, it is important to stay on a lead lap, because, if you get a caution and you're then a lap down, you're kind of trapped. So I think it's kind of a good thing that drivers are able to fight for that position to maintain their status on the lead lap, because what if a caution comes out, they can put fresh tyres on and they can attack it. And, the cars that are getting lapped are from the teams that tend to be fighting to stay in the leader's circle, where every position in every race matters, even if it's fighting for 16th, 17th place. So, yeah, I do tend to agree that actually it is not that much of a problem. I mean, it can be a problem. In the case of St. Pete, it kind of made the race pretty exciting. It spiced things up, right? It was quite a dull race in many ways. But no, I think it's a decent way that they do it in IndyCar, because at the end of the day, if you are the leader of the race and you're coming up on lap traffic, okay, you don't want to take any risks, but you should be passing that car anyway, regardless of blue flags. And I think what Pelot says about maybe just disabling push to pass or overtake for the car that is fighting to stay on the lead lap might be the fairest way of doing it. It's kind of a nice middle ground without, just artificially making them move over, which, obviously that works in Formula One, but IndyCar obviously pays points for every single position. F1, if you're in the bottom 10, you're not getting points. So, yeah, I think my solution would be what Pelot says, maybe disable push to pass, but still allow those drivers to fight for their position to stay on the lead lap, because you don't know what's going to happen.
You feel that would become quite easy, though, potentially for an attacking car to overtake all these lap cars. And yeah, I guess it will work some places. I mean, it's never really a problem on ovals, for example. It's obviously road and street courses where this is a problem, because obviously push to pass isn't really a thing on ovals.
And ovals are a different kettle of fish as well. I think in terms of especially short ovals, I mean, blue flag rule would just wouldn't work, because cars fall so many laps down. And that's kind of just a big part on short ovals in particular, isn't it, as well? Like, that's a big part of the skill and the art and being good at driving on a short oval, is being able to navigate the traffic, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But road and street obviously is what fundamentally comes down to. And I think I'd adjust the rule ever so slightly, where you're shown the blue flag once you go down to the leader, as opposed to the entire field, is maybe the one thing I'd change, just because you don't want idiots basically defending for every position when they're being lapped by 4, 5, 6 cars. So that's potentially what I change. But I think the rule is itself is fine. I mean, because then if you disable push to pass for the defending driver, at what point is that push to pass disabled? And people still exploit some guidelines somewhere or some way.
Plus, they might be in a battle of their own. They might be needing to just push to pass if they are, I don't know, say Stingray Rob and Robert Schwartzman are fighting for 17th position. They might be using push
and
to pass
that causes more problems. So, like, Pelot's theory is a good one from his perspective, but doesn't take into account what's happening throughout the rest of the field where they might actually need push to pass for whatever reason. So,
and ultimately, like, racing drivers love to say it's the same for everyone, I've noticed, but it is the same for everyone. At the end of the day, this is the rule for everyone, and they've got to. It's part of your skill set as an IndyCar driver that you've got to navigate lap traffic. So maybe the rule isn't that much of a problem.
Yeah. So I think in theory, Pelot's idea was good, but doesn't need changing. I think it just adds to the skill set. I know it's a bit different in F1 because you will have people who are in the best car and just drive away, and maybe that doesn't showcase the best of the best, and the best of the best will need to overtake from the front still. So, no, I'm fine with it. I think the rule is fine. I can see why people want it to change, but no, I don't think there's much point. Drivers at the front should be capable of overtaking back markers, and if they can't, well, that's their problem.
That's the crux of it.
That's absolutely their problem. I know. Pato War said the other week, it's quite interesting how Hondas hold up Chevrolets, but Chevrolets don't really hold up Hondas, which was an interesting comment.
It becomes quite political. It becomes quite political
for something so simple. But anyway, that's a Chevrolet issue to manage. But just something that came up in the last few weeks, and yeah, but it's basically because Foster was holding up O'Ward as much as he could, which caused O'Ward a bit of grief. I mean, Pelot probably would have got him anyway, but hey ho, it happens. Right, let's move on to closing the pits under caution, because this is quite a controversial one. So if you didn't know, most motorsport series, again, the pits just remain open during a safety car unless it's physically obstructing the pits, basically. IndyCar is, they close the pits, get all the field together, then open the pits, and that's basically how it works. Simple as that. So it's the reverse where you go into the pits and then bunch up on those series. IndyCar is you bunch up and then the pit lane opens. So I think the first and foremost was New Garden in Laguna Seca last year where IndyCar kept the pits open so everybody needs to pit. That definitely shouldn't be a thing. I don't think anyone is saying that should continue, because obviously if you didn't catch it, there was quite a controversial scenario where I think it was Marcus Armstrong had a spin or something, and the series basically didn't throw the caution, which was inevitably going to come, to allow everybody to have a pit cycle effectively. And so it really, really, really benefited Joseph Newgarden. He shot up from about 10th to 2nd because of it, because them keeping the pits open. So that's something they definitely shouldn't do. Basically delay throwing a caution to make it fair or whatever, because at the end of the day, we always speak about the danger zone and staying out there when others are pitted, and that's your problem for being in the danger zone. It's called the danger zone for a reason. Like, if you just delay cautions, well, fundamentally there is no danger zone. It's just whenever you want to pit. So that's something which needs to be addressed, which needs to go. There's quite a lot of criticism about it after the Laguna Seca, so I don't think it's something that would really pop up again. But yeah, it's an interesting one because it is the reverse once again to what a lot of series do. Obviously, the benefits are you do have this danger zone, which I do feel is quite cool. I guess the other perspective of it is you do really end up having multiple strategies going on, because in a lot of other series, well, everyone will just pit at the same time because that's the convenient way to do it. And it's the status quo before and after you pit, whilst IndyCar, complete opposite. I mean, obviously the same works in NASCAR as well. Complete opposite. Adds a little bit of different strategies you can really have going on, because people would just naturally cycle to the front because they were slightly off strategy, whilst those who were at the front have to drop behind them because the pits were closed. So I actually kind of like the way they do it. I can see why people want to close pit, but that just removes a bit of jeopardy and excitement for me. And from a safety perspective, that's actually probably the better thing to do. Wait until the track's clear and they are bunched up, and then let everybody go into the pits rather than sort of having a staggered cycle the first couple of laps.
It's another one where there's two real sides to it. Like, I feel like just keeping the pits open would make things easier. You wouldn't have to delay cautions. But the whole thing with that Newgarden situation was like, in trying not to disadvantage one driver, you ended up actually advantaging that driver and disadvantaging others, and it all gets a bit confusing. So, I mean, yeah, you talk about safety. Like, the wisest thing to do from a safety standpoint, take that Newgarden example. You either you just keep the pits open, so there's not this whole, we need to make sure this car pits so it's not disadvantaged, or you do just close the pits instantly. The jeopardy you talk about, my only kind of qualm with that is it feels like it's relying a lot on luck and drivers who, yeah, is it luck? Is it not? It's a hard one, really, because you are putting yourself in that danger zone, but at the same time, it is misfortune because a quicker car could just be, evidently disadvantaged. So it's. I don't have a definitive answer for it, really. I don't think either way is bad, and I think maybe IndyCar doing it in the unique way that they do isn't a bad thing as such. It's actually pretty exciting when you get one of those pit cycles where pretty much every car is in at once. It can get pretty frenetic, and the order can get twisted up quite significantly as well. So yeah, I don't have a definitive answer for you, to be honest.
Puts more pressure on the pit crews, the IndyCar way, which is quite fun.
Does.
That's a little bit more work on them. So yeah, it's hard either way because, but at the same time, it's the same for every other series. I mean, if you pit before a safety car, exactly the same works out where somebody would jump to the front.
Exactly.
So there's no perfectly fair way of doing it.
There's always, when there's cautions and there's safety cars and there's yellow flags, there's always going to be some luck to it. That's just how the cookie crumbles in racing.
Yeah, pretty much. So should we move on to, I guess, maybe the qualifying procedures, which is rather complicated. It's not very simple, the qualifying procedures. I mean, to us, I don't even know it off the top of my head. So I have to double check this regularly because it is so confusing. So I'll read what IndyCar says. If a car causes a red flag condition at any segment or otherwise interferes with qualifications as determined by IndyCar, the car's best 2-time lap to the segment will be disallowed and the car shall not be allowed to advance to the next segment. If a car causes 2 red flag conditions in one or more segments or otherwise interferes with qualifications as determined by IndyCar, all segment times shall be voided and the car shall not be permitted to participate in the remainder of qualifying. If a car causes a yellow flag condition that interferes with the attempt of another car, the violating car's best lap during that segment will be disallowed. If the violation occurs during the Firestone Fast 6, all the other cars' laps in that segment shall be voided and the car not permitted to continue in that session. So complicated. I'll do a TLDR. Red flag means you lose your 2 best times and you can't advance. If you cause a yellow, the best lap of that segment will be disallowed. It's the simplest way of doing it.
I really like that. I really like that. I think the only thing that almost causing a red flag, having your best 2 times taken away and not being allowed to advance feels a little bit harsh. Maybe just take your 2 best times away, and if they can somehow set
if your third fastest time is good enough to go through, I think you should be allowed to advance.
You probably deserve.
That's an incredible lap.
But at the same time, I like the rule. I think you're being punished for making mistakes, which is probably how it should be, really.
But I'd argue you naturally get punished because you made a mistake. And do you discourage people from going as fast as they possibly can because they could make a mistake, which could effectively mean they go from 3rd to 12th?
And I think the yellow flag rule is pretty good as well, because you're at the end of the day you have interfere. If you of course a yellow flag, you are interfering with another driver's lap because they are not able to go obviously at their top speed on that lap. If you of course a yellow flag, so it's only fair that as the it stops any kind of gamesmanship, doesn't it? In terms of just, oh no, I went down in the runoff. That means my competitors can't set quicker times. I like that. I think that's pretty good. I think that's a nice way of punishing them. In my opinion, I'd slightly adjust it where it'd be your fastest time to that point if you make a yellow flag, because setting 2 times good enough for the fast 6 is pretty difficult in IndyCar because just of how competitive it is. So I'd maybe adjust that slightly, but I do agree it stops. You've had some famous F1 incidents of people just parking it to get the pole position. That obviously is something that would never happen, which from that perspective is actually quite good. I mean, the red flags in qualifying they're pretty rare. I had no idea about the 2 red flag rules. I've read that for the first ever time, but I mean that's fair enough. I mean, if you cause 2 red flags anyway and are still going, I do really respect that. But I think they're not advancing things a bit pedantic because realistically, who's going to advance if 3? Yeah, and you no matter a mistake, you do deserve to advance if you set 3 times good enough to advance.
Exactly, and a yellow flag rule. Yeah, I think it's. I'm in favour for it on the whole. I think it could do some twisting. and sort of it does potentially discourage people from actually setting faster laps. But no, overall, I'm pretty happy with that. I think it's a good rule. Obviously, this only applies to road and street because the oval ones are obviously individual laps. Maybe we should make our own rule. You can it's group qualifying on ovals. Just spice it up a little bit. That'd be fun.
That would be interesting. Should we just discuss that?
Let's discuss it. I mean, it wouldn't really work because people would get some dirty slipstreams, which would.
Oh yeah, I didn't even consider that group qualifying would mean every car would have to be on track at the same time. That would be mayhem. That would have to be like an exhibition.
Imagine that at Iowa. It'd be carnage.
Yeah, I was thinking more you were suggesting like, oh, will they just be split up into groups anyway and go and do individual runs?
Everyone goes for a free-for-all.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, if we're being realistic, I really like how oval qualifying goes. I think I love the system of it. But it would be mayhem, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I like the random draw Indianapolis. Maybe they should bring it back every month because that is quite cool. Having a random draw, but. Yeah, I mean, I guess bottom to top works, and the best, because you are the best, get the best of track conditions. Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, imagine Iowa having 27 cars attempting to qualify at once. Somebody who gets a dirty slipstream just overtaking on all your qualifying laps would be quite something.
That would be nuts. That would be a hell of a watch.
Yeah, yeah, that would be. That's quite fun actually. I do like the concept. I like to see it once, but only once, just to see how chaotic it is. I'm sure some people will be very unhappy and others after that qualifying session. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens with it. But that would be really fun. But let's go on to some of the ones that we asked you to provide, which, we'll see. We haven't read these yet, so this is going to be quite interesting. Drivers should have to run 2 full green laps on both tyre options. It's reasonable. Obviously, the rule is going to run 2 laps of any kind. So, I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean, you don't really see anybody running exactly 2 laps on the combine anyway. So,
yeah, I think 2 green laps is fair because then that avoids basically what you saw at St. Pete, where drivers were starting on the alternates, gambling on a caution, and just getting immediately off them. They're not running by doing that. You are not really running the compound. I think that should absolutely be the rule, and I wouldn't be surprised if they change it to make that the rule. To be honest.
Yeah, so that's fine. Push to pass should be available on ovals as well, but limited to 5 or even 3 uses per race for all races. Now, on ovals feels like it could be a bit dangerous. Maybe dangerous is the wrong word, but it could be a bit wild introducing push to pass on ovals because you would have some cars of ridiculous. Imagine Iowa, and you got push to pass, and you have such an overspeed of somebody. It would be a bit ridiculous, I think.
Yeah, that could get dangerous. But now, obviously, they have the hybrid boost.
But that's not a particularly big boost, though.
No, it's not. But I think, saying you have that and push to pass on an oval, you probably are getting into unsafe territory. Yeah, I would imagine. I think it would be interesting, and especially if you have 3 pushes, you have to properly manage that, don't you?
But I don't like that. I like the fact they can manage it to a driver's liking, and having 3 pushes per race is a bit low, because nobody would use it for the whole race because you'd save it all for the last 5 laps in case a caution comes out. So
yeah, that's also true. That's a good point. Your brain is working well tonight.
I like managing your own push to pass because I mean it wouldn't make the first bit of the race particularly good, in my opinion. So. Yeah, I mean, nice thought on ovals, but I don't think it. I think having races where it's all sort of just the car as opposed to additional boosts is quite cool. So
yeah, it keeps the rawness, doesn't it? That we like in IndyCar, I guess.
We move on to standing start. Nah. Rolling starts are fun.
I'm not a fan.
They are. Standing starts are exciting, but. On ovals, you obviously really have to do a rolling start. You can't do standing start on an oval. That'd be particularly brave.
I think it's fine as it is. And to be honest, you probably get even more exciting starts than you get in series that have standing starts, just because the field is so packed up together. Obviously, too wide from the moment they cross the line to start the race. So, no, I'm heavily against standing starts.
Yeah, rolling starts helps the leader as well, who deserve to qualify first.
And again, it's just another thing that makes IndyCar different to other single-seater series, which I just think is never a bad thing.
2 wide caution restarts on all tracks. yes, I want this. NASCAR do it. Especially on ovals, it adds a little bit more excitement towards the end of the race if people in multiple lines. Yeah, no, I absolutely applaud this. I think it makes it a bit more exciting. I know NASCAR do it with the choose rule, which is all right. But yeah, no, I actually really like this. I mean, adds a bit more jeopardy, a bit more pressure to the leader. Yeah, why not? It's too wide and great. Let's do it.
I think it's entertaining without feeling like super artificial. I think it feels a little bit unfair to the leader, but at the same time, as we see it on race starts, I mean, how often does the leader actually really lose the lead? Not that often, really. So there's not huge amounts of jeopardy there. I think it would make things super exciting, of course. Yeah, but it's not a bad suggestion. That I'm pretty for that too.
Quite good. I mean, there's one here which isn't a specific rule as such, but if you didn't know, Scott Dixon was penalised for losing an engine at Sebring because it basically blew up on his outlap. I believe they have 3 engines per season. I'm right, maybe 4 engines per season, I believe. I'm
not sure the exact amount, but the penalties seem to tally up very quickly.
Yeah. Anyway, they have a set amount of engines per year. It's about 3, 4, or 5. And one of Dixon's basically blew on his outlap in pre-season testing, and IndyCar's point was sort of like, we can't give any leeway. Everyone's got the same guidelines. If we open this up for you, does that open up for somebody else? But I still think that's just a bit harsh. I mean, it's very harsh on Dixon, but yeah, I mean, I get why Ganassi be upset, because sorry, their fault an engine blew straight away, and after 3 laps or whatever, that's terrible.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I feel like the rule should only apply in kind of a competitive setting. I know ultimately there are finances and monetary things involved with the engines and enough engines being manufactured, but it feels like, maybe teams could just have an allocated test engine, for instance. That would feel like a more fair way of doing it.
Yeah.
Rather than this, because I get the point that obviously Dixon then comes into the season with an advantage if he's got a fresh engine, as other teams are using engines that they've already had mileage on. So that's where the rule kind of does make sense. But then if every team just had a test engine and they all enter the season with a fresh engine, then that would make more sense to me.
Make the hybrid like push to pass, limited number of users for a limited time, adding the same horsepower at the same track locations for all the cars does nothing for the competition and probably reduces the ability to overtake. Now, I do agree the hybrid as an overtaking tool isn't particularly good from what we've seen, at least in my opinion. I mean, push to pass is obviously a way more powerful tool. And yeah, I think, I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but it feels like it maybe is something you could charge for a longer period of time than just a lap. And you could just save it up or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the boosts are pretty negligible as well. Like, it's not a super duper long boost either when they do deploy, but I think it has been the case of ultimately the weight of the hybrid has basically just cancelled out any boost that it's given at this stage. And I think, there ultimately needs to be more boost, but that has to, have guaranteed reliability with it. And I guess they're at a point at the moment where they can't up the boost without thinking they might sacrifice reliability. It's a difficult one. I mean, push to pass is still the predominant thing. If you make overtake from the hybrid the same as push to pass, then you're kind of a bit like, well, what's the point? So I think where this needs to be fixed is ultimately the hybrid deployment is a higher horsepower. That's got to be the change, but that has to come with guaranteed reliability. You can't just do that if it's going to make hybrids expire.
Oh, the hybrid is not popular, is it? Pretty similar to what we've just discussed. You can only switch tyre compounds during a green flag pit stop, which is actually quite a good idea. So it's like tweak to what we said. Stop teams backing on early caution to change their halves for the remainder of the race, and vice versa, using a set of a soft compound to gain an advantage late.
I think the better way of doing this is what we said before, that you need to run the compounds for a certain amount of laps.
Well, I guess the issue with that is if a caution comes out during a late pit window, you're penalised by having to make another stop if you haven't run the other compound, which would be the issue there. Not a nice theory, but I think you'd if it was like mid race and you hadn't run the other compound, the caution comes out in your fuel window, well, you're stuffed. So
yeah, exactly.
So someone's here suggests standing starts again. Obviously, with the hybrid, they don't have a stalling issue, which I suggested, which is true. Although, where would they do it? St. Petersburg would work, Indy GP would work, Long Beach would work, Laguna, possibly in Portland. But the problem is Road America because it's on a hill.
Imagine a standing start on an oval.
Yeah, well, I mean, imagine the Iowa banking. You got one car just sliding down the track, and the other one, that really would not work. Well, a slight adjustment to our blue flag rule. Suggestion here: it should be mandatory only when the driver in front is obstructing the leaders or is deliberately slowing. I completely disagree when some drivers try to give a hand to teammates or even teams to the same engine provider for a long time. F1, the blue flag rule is a subset that has to cease your fight for position to open the door. An IndyCar driver can slow the peloton down without any penalty. I think the problem is with this is what is deliberately slowing or trying to obstruct the leader.
I think, to be fair, it is a valid point. Like, if you have a team car, I don't know, take Chip Ganassi Racing, for example, with their third car, Kiffin Simpson, who is not yet at a point where he's fighting at the front and may indeed get to a point where he's going to be lapped. Alex Palou's in second, and you've got, I don't know, Scott McLaughlin leading the race. I don't agree with the fact that drivers should be allowed, to deliberately slow a car from a rival manufacturer.
The problem is what do you define as slowing down? Is it their lap time is a certain percent slower than the previous laps won the race?
I think that would be the way of doing it, or they are blocking, which again is a penalty. And I think ultimately, you could say, okay, you penalise the car that's going to be lapped, that's holding up the car, but that doesn't really do anything because their whole sole purpose is to be holding these cars up. So it's whether you.
I guess in situations like Stingray Robs, that doesn't change because his lap times would probably be pretty similar. But this one, at least, it stops that sort of manufacturer bias.
Yeah.
With people deliberately going slower.
But it's how you can dish out penalties. Do you just say, okay, if you can clearly prove that Kiffin Simpson's holding up?
This is a blue flag, so you'd put a blue flag out if they are deliberately slowing.
Okay, but in the event that there there weren't blue flags, for instance, I think that's a decent idea, to be fair. But if we were to say, another way of solving it as it is at the moment, maybe you say if you can obviously prove that, say, Kiffin Simpson's holding up Scott McLaughlin to allow Alex Palou to gain ground, do you then say, okay, well, the 10 car gets a penalty as well?
It's not really Palou's fault, is it?
It's not, but it's if it's a team instruction.
Yeah, but that could be a team fine. It's a bit unfair to penalise Palou for something that he's.
But then that's a team fine. No, of course, but a team fine is probably not enough of an incentive. This is why it's just a tricky situation.
If you do a big fine.
Well, yeah. You'd have to make it a pretty substantial fine.
But NASCAR had this at Martinsville last year, where I think it was Ross Chastain and Austin Dillon basically I can't remember who it was, but they just basically held up someone and formed like a roadblock. And I think they received a really heavy fine, and basically their entire crew was gone for the next race. Something like that.
Not a bad shout.
Works. So it's quite complicated. It opens another can of worms, as sort of all these rules would do. But I do think maybe if they are slowing and they are outside of a certain percentage of their previous 5 laps, I think you can throw a blue flag then. But the problem is when you start penalising other people, it might get complicated. But I think that's a fairer solution if maybe their last lap is a massive percentage slower. At that point, you let them go. What about adding an extra tyre? That's one we've had a few suggestions of. Obviously, Formula One, for example, will have 3 tyre compounds during an event. IndyCar only has 2 different compounds. So there's a suggestion here that we keep the same amount of actual sets, but you add an extra compound, which would potentially, just make strategy is basically impossible with 2 compounds. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that would work with 3.
God, it would probably make the racing even more exciting in terms of the amount of split strategy. I don't know whether it's needed. I'm not sure it's really needed. I think the 2 compounds work so well, especially when there is like a good enough disparity between the 2 of them, that if you then throw a third compound in, because you're not going to say, oh, you have to run all 3 compounds. You'd probably say you have to run 2 compounds as the rule. That would maybe just make the alternate or the softest tyre a bit redundant, you would feel, because I don't know. I feel like it works fine as it is.
Yeah, strategy is complicated enough with 2 tires already. Do you really need to throw another one to the mix? Quite possibly not. Especially in thermal, adding an extra tire compound in there as well. That would be carnage. That would be absolutely chaos. Of course, a lot of these are actually about what we've discussed, saying if a caution is warranted, throw it regardless of where it is in the pit cycle.
That's a must.
A lot of people are in agreement with us there, so at least that's quite good. Final one, which seems to be quite unpopular, judging by the amount of comments, but that's exactly what we need to discuss, is overtime finishes. It's the same rule set as NASCAR. So if you don't know what NASCAR overtime is, if there is a caution thrown towards the end of the race and they need to go beyond the allocated race distance to get more green flag running in, they will run something called overtime. So what overtime is, it's whenever this incident is cleared up, it could be 10 laps after scheduled finish, 5 laps, however long it is, NASCAR will run 2 green flag laps. On the first lap, if there is another caution, the cycle will repeat. So we'll go back to overtime, and you'll do another overtime cycle effectively if there is a yellow thrown on that first lap. If there is no yellow on the first lap, you obviously head to the white flag, and then the term they use is the next flag ends the race. So if that's the checker flag or the caution flag, that will end the race. Simple as that. So it is, what's the word? Unpopular maybe isn't the word. It's controversial between NASCAR fans because it is a very, very, very manufactured form of racing, extending the race length to effectively do your best to end under green. It's the ultimate adder of jeopardy, but it also really isn't authentic because there's countless NASCAR races. I mean, Homestead Miami Xfinity a few weeks ago, where Kyle Larson had absolutely dominated the race. I think it was a quarter of about 5 laps to go. And Larson, who was up by about 15 seconds, ended up finishing 4th due to an overtime finish. So I think my problem with overtime is and I'm a very casual watcher of NASCAR. So I think it's great in NASCAR because it's fun. I mean, I don't really care about what happens because it's just entertaining to see. But it is a very, as I said, manufactured and potentially unfair form of racing for somebody who could be sick all day long. Just cycles to the front because, first of all, the problem is the fuel, because obviously you fuel to the end. And I know some NASCAR teams will probably fuel up by an extra 2 laps or so just in case there is an overtime. But you do strategy to 70 laps, not 78, just in case there is a caution. And there was a race in Nashville last year for NASCAR where I think they had about 5 or 6 overtime finishes. And basically it was a game of who had the most fuel, which it's too manufactured. I think it's fun to watch as a casual, but it just creates such a manufactured form of racing that it just isn't really fair. And if IndyCar wants to put itself as one of the premier open single-seater series on the planet, having a policy which can completely change the outcome of races in the final 2 laps seems rather unfair.
It's just one big gimmick, and I don't agree with that. I don't think that's how sport should be. Sport should reward the quickest or the best performing driver or team on every occasion as much as they possibly can. And obviously luck will factor in occasionally with cautions or what have you. But I ultimately think you run to the set number of laps because as you say, it introduces just jeopardy that, we like jeopardy sometimes, but the jeopardy such as, it's just whoever has the most fuel. It's not really, there's no sporting integrity there. You're not rewarding the best performing individual or team, which is how it should be. And I've not got much more to say on it other than that. It's, we all like entertainment, but and sport is in some ways the entertainment business, but there's a line, and I think overtime ultimately crosses that line where you just lose so much integrity that it's a little bit of a joke, and it is just very gimmicky.
I mean, now it's only fair we raise a NASCAR playoff system as well.
Don't even go there.
Game. No, we need to. We need to go to the episode to do it. If you don't know what the playoffs are, long story short, do your own research on NASCAR playoffs. No, it's a stupid idea. You get champions like Joey Logano, who were terrible the entire year and won due to a ridiculous championship format where you only need to win. You can be terrible for 99% of the year, but win 2 or 3 races and you'll be a champion. So That's how NASCAR playoff series system works. So, although it is quite fun, which I did it once or twice in the off season. We're working out the IndyCar champion via the playoff system, and that was rather fun actually. So, I think we said O'Ward was last year's champion based on the playoffs, which basically shows you the flaws of the system by the fact that O'Ward did not have a particularly good year, but because he got 3 very well timed race wins in a theoretical playoff scenario, he would be the champion. So that's the issue of it basically.
It's nonsense.
Quite fun though. Again,
that's my 2 cents.
Quite fun as a casual, but yeah, no, I mean, there's a reason why. First of all, playoffs are unpopular. Why overtime was unpopular. We haven't even gone into stage racing yet because that's even more unpopular. So, yeah, NASCAR has a lot of rules which, thankfully, IndyCar haven't carried over, which are particularly unpopular. So. I believe that is all. That's all of them. We've had quite a lot of comments. I mean, a lot of them are to do with the tyre rules and the caution rules, effectively, but obviously, which we've both done. So good to see that a lot of people are sort of on the same wavelength here when it comes to these rule books. But to be honest, we've gone through these. We haven't really actually changed very much, have we? We've been quite passive here on this episode.
No, I mean, I guess that shows that the framework of the championship's pretty solid.
So what would you change of all the ones that we've gone through so far?
I think the biggest one, and it's probably a little bit boring, is just running each set of tyres 2 laps in the green flag conditions. That's the one that sticks out to me the most because it seems relevant to what we had in St. Pete, obviously.
Yeah, I quite like the blue flag suggestion that us and this user have sort of created with, if somebody is holding somebody up, if they're not in a percentage of their lap times, you have to blue flag them, which I think is
I like that as well.
Fair.
I know it's kind of subjective, but there's always going to be some subjectivity to it.
I know there is with every rule, isn't there? I mean, what I would also say is IndyCar's rule book needs to be less. It needs to be more organised. Is what because there's a lot of penalties which are just random. There's a lot of penalties which you just feel random. One incident won't be penalised the same as the next incident, for example.
Yeah, I like that there's flexibility in terms of the penalties, but there also needs to be a bit more consistency.
Because when it comes to qualifying, especially Thermal, there were about 3 or 4 incidents where drivers were just blatantly impeding another driver, but didn't get penalised. But you go to Long Beach and they'll do exactly the same thing, and they will get penalised. So that's one which really bugs me. Qualifying interference, because they just seem to make it up as they go along, really. So. There are talking of rules. There are 2 drivers who actually got penalised from Thermal for breaking the rules. Neither of them have really any impact at all, but we'll go over them anyway. The first one was Robert Schwartzman, who obviously had a disastrous weekend at the Thermal Club after his car erupted into flames in opening practice. IndyCar investigated this fire, and they determined the approved emergency pull cable, which activates the onboard fire suppression system, was not used as supplied and replaced by the team with an unapproved product which failed to activate. So, bit of an ouch on Prama's part. So the fire is sort of their fault fundamentally. So they were fined $25,000, which to them is probably pocket money, and forfeit 10 championship pension points, which is obviously the points that you need for a leader circle. But for Prema, that means absolutely nothing because they can't get the leader circle. So basically, $25,000 fine for Prema.
Well, you would expect better from them than to. I know they're new to the series, but they are a top racing organisation across the world. So you'd expect better than them for a kind of misstep like that at the end of the day impacts safety and really derailed their weekend.
And then number 26 of Colton Herter was also received exactly the same penalty, actually, because as per Rule 14.1.4, approved suppliers must submit bulletins to IndyCar for approval prior to releasing bulletins to entries. Once submitted bulletins are approved by IndyCar, members are subject to enforcement by IndyCar, and IndyCar discovered the team incorrectly attached the anti-intrusion plates on the aft leg of the front lower wishbones by using only 1 plate per side of the chassis instead of the 2 per side, a total of 4, which were mandated in Delara Bulletin released February 14th, 2025. That's rather wordy and very complicated. But they've broken some technical rule and they've got a penalty for it. It's exactly the same. Fine 10 championship pension points. I doubt that's going to be of any concern to her. So you can get the leader circle, but you'd hope would be well above 22nd in the standings. And again, $25,000 is not going to be too much to Andretti Global, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, the short of that is that it was not anything that gave him a performance gain, which is why Herter himself has not been penalised for it, because it will have been so negligible that it really would be unfair if he was docked points himself.
Last couple of weeks, this last week, I should say, not last couple of weeks, there have been some tests. Both Robert Schwartzman and Louis Foster did their first oval test at Nashville Superspeedway. Schwartzman did 168 laps in the end, and Jacob Abel did his at Texas. We obviously spoke to him about a week after that happened, actually. So check out that interview to get his thoughts on it. But now all three rookies have sort of done a high-speed oval test, so that was basically the point for Schwartzman and Foster, because they do need to do one before the Indy 500. So that's why they were testing there last week.
That's particularly big for Prema too, because that was their first oval test, if I am informed correctly.
And then there was also a test at the IMS road course. Dixon and Pillow were there. Actually, all Ganassis were there. Both Forts were there. Abel was there, and both Hunkosses were there ahead of the Indianapolis Grand Prix on May 10th, which obviously starts the month of May festivities. It wasn't an open test, so all times were hidden from the public view. But yeah, pretty much that. A fairly standard test day, no crashes or anything. I know we had Felix Rosenqvist had a crash in Barber a few weeks ago, as we noted, but seemed like there were no issues.
Yeah, nothing was reported. But one thing I would just note actually is that obviously you've got Foyt and Ganassi at that test. For the teams that have alliances, it's pretty beneficial because they can send, one of the teams can go to one test. So in this case, Barber, and then the other team in the alliance can then go to, in this case, the Indianapolis road course. So that helps to get data for both of those teams, which is a nice little bonus if you are in a technical alliance.
So I think for this week, that's probably everything we've got. I think that was a nice little fun episode there. We might do some more of your react to your XYZ here, because I think there's been two pretty funky episodes that we've done there. So pretty good fun.
Let us know what we should react to.
Yeah, if you've got, as always, we comment on the YouTube. I think you can comment on Spotify as well. So if you do have any suggestions for the podcast or any episode ideas you'd like to see, obviously let us know, and we'll be very open to any ideas. Next week is obviously another off week before we go to Long Beach, as is the case pretty much every episode. We have no idea what's going on, but you will have something. Hopefully that'll be a bit better next week. So we powered on through. So we'll see what the situation is like next week. But there is our reaction to some of your IndyCar rule suggestions. Obviously a lot on very much the same wavelength. But good to see we're all in agreement, us IndyCar fans. So time to put pressure on J. Douglas Bowles and Mark Miles to implement these rule changes that we suggest. But yeah, thanks for engaging with us, and always thanks for tuning in. Thanks very much for watching, and thanks very much for listening to those of you on Spotify and any podcast app, I should say. I mean, we should be more inclusive. Any podcast app, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, anything you're listening to. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.